councillors, and it will be the 5 of us who will be making the decisions on the matters in front of us this evening. Also joined by officers who will be presenting the application in front of us and also offering advice as we go through the evening. And the officer team is led by Amanda Reid on my immediate left, who's the Director of Planning. So, if we can start, are there any apologies for absence? Holly?
Good evening, Chairman. We have no apologies for absence this evening. Thank you.
No, there are none. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Toby. Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the interest of transparency, it's known that I do live in the area, and just by nature of my neighbours and my friends, I'm aware of the history and controversies around the site, and also in the interest of transparency, I would just like it noted that we as councillors have had a number of presentations from the applicants in the council buildings. Now, it is normal that we would have private, paid for presentations of this nature in print, but again, if anyone is interested in if I was to, in good conscience, speak about the transparency of this process, I will say that we have actually, I believe we have been petitioned quite strongly by the applicants in a way which is not available to objectors. Thank you for indulging me, Chair.
Yep, sorry, Chairman. Just want to check that Councillor Benton can determine the application tonight with an open mind.
I absolutely can, yes.
Are there any other declarations? There are none. Very good. Now, I think we actually do have minutes of a couple of previous meetings. First of all, a meeting that was held for the Planning Committee on the 1st of May. Colleagues, can I sign that as a record of that meeting, please? Thank you. And also the meeting that was held on the 1st of July. Can I sign those minutes as well, please? Thank you. Well, in that case, we can move rapidly on to the main business of the evening, which is to consider the application for Sainsbury's and surrounding former utilities land at Canal Way, London W10. Now, we're going to begin with a presentation by the case officer, Emma Gore, and she'll be assisted by her team leader, Martin Lomas, who's sitting to her right there. So, Emma, when you're ready, please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I would like to draw members' attention to the addendum report setting out amendments and revisions to the officer report, revisions to and additional conditions, and further comments received on the application since the publication of the report. The application site is located within the Kensal Canalside Opportunity Area, which is located to the north of the borough within the Dalgarno ward. This image shows the full extent of the Kensal Canalside Opportunity Area. The Opportunity Area is allocated for comprehensive redevelopment under both the Council's Local Plan 2024 and London Plan 2021. The KCOA is primarily made up of land which formerly accommodated a gasworks, which have been decommissioned. Currently, the site contains commercial uses, including a supermarket, offices, and some small-scale residential located in the Boathouse Activity Centre. The site represents previously developed land for which the National Planning Policy Framework directs development. The southern portion of the Kensal Canal Side Opportunity Area, located south of the Great Western Main Line Railway, is owned by the Department for Transport and is in use for operational railway purposes until at least 2030. The image before members shows the extent of the planning application site. The site forms the largest land parcel within the opportunity area and the majority of the northern parcel of the land. The opportunity area extends to around 15.4 hectares, with the application site comprising 7.62 hectares. The Kensal Canal Side Opportunity Area is allocated for redevelopment under the Local Plan and London Plan, which together form the Development Plan. London Plan Policy SD1 has allocated 48 opportunity areas for development across London, for which the Kensal Canal Side Opportunity Area is expected to deliver around 3,500 residential homes and 2,000 jobs. This is mirrored by the Council's local plan adopted in July of last year. The local plan allocates the site under Policy SA1. With the local plan, the spatial strategy for the borough sets a hierarchy of where growth will be accommodated, with opportunity areas being the areas where most of the growth will be located. The local plan further identifies opportunity areas as being the location where there is significant capacity to build new homes. To reflect the Council's vision of the Kensal Canal Side Opportunity Area as a new, mixed and inclusive community, the site allocation under Policy SA1 contains a number of criteria for which any development within the KCOA must address. It should be noted that while the application site is not holistically responsible for delivery of all of the criteria of Policy SA1, as the largest land parcel, it is expected to deliver the majority of the requirements of the allocation. The primary function of the KCOA is to see the delivery of residential homes to address the borough's housing need. The policy requires around 3,500 or more homes. This does not express a minimum or maximum cap. The delivery of housing is further supported by Local Plan Policy HO1, which sets out the borough's housing requirements, identifying that the council will aim to meet and exceed the London Plan targets, which seek delivery of 4,480 homes over a 10-year period, setting out that within the first 5 years, the council would seek to deliver 1,250 homes. The site allocation also seeks to deliver a new neighbourhood centre within the Kensal Canal Side Opportunity Area. This is set out as being formed by delivery of around 12,000 square metres or more of non-residential floor space. The policy sets out this should be formed of such uses as workspace, community and local shopping facilities. This is supported by Local Plan Policy V2, which seeks to create new neighbourhoods in opportunity areas, and PLV1, which seeks to create a well-connected, mixed and inclusive community. Of the 12,000 square metres, 5,000 square metres is stipulated by the policy to be delivered as office space, research and development or light industrial floor space. Of this workspace, 10% should be affordable workspace at a capped rate of 50% less than the prevailing market rate for a period of 20 years. The site allocation under Local Plan Policy seeks the relocation and reprovision of the existing supermarket, which is also outlined in the Kensal Canal Side Supplementary Planning document. As per Local Plan Policy CD8, the site has been identified as an area which can accommodate tall buildings. The site allocation sets out specific height parameters across the KCOA. The application site would be located within Zones A and C in the image before you. Zone B applies only to the southern half of the KCOA. Zone C, which is situated between the railway line and into the centre of the KCOA, allows for buildings of up to 98 metres in height. Zone A, adjacent to the canal, and a small portion to the southern half of the KCOA, allows for buildings up to 30 metres in height. The site allocation seeks a number of criterions for forming the principles for delivery within the Kensal Canal Side Opportunity Area. These include delivery of new and improved infrastructure, notably the remodelling of the Ladbroke Grove Junction, new pedestrian and cycle bridges over the railway and canal, and new streets to connect to the area into its surrounding context and public transport links. One of the key principles to aid in delivery of the land use requirements within the site allocation is the stipulation of a high-density development. The policy also contains numerous other requirements, such as the long-term safeguarding of the Elizabeth Line station, the relocation and improvement of such facilities as the Boathouse Activity Centre and Canalside House, both of which are owned by the council. The policy also seeks to secure social infrastructure, including public open space, community facilities, and Section 106 financial contributions towards infrastructure requirements such as healthcare and education. The site allocation sets out a number of townscape principles for development within the KCOA. These focus lower height and finer grain development towards the canal. The allocation directs taller buildings towards the railway. And the townscape principles also set out that development should respond to a coherent range of heights on Ladbroke Grove, with taller buildings designed to address the site entrance and create distinctiveness. The allocation calls for a variation to the heights of the taller buildings. The townscape principles also reflect on local heritage, with a requirement that a sense of openness and sky views directly opposite the Kensal Green Cemetery entrance gate are retained. Turning to the development itself, the proposal seeks to deliver up to 2,519 homes, with delivery of 25% affordable housing by habitable room. Within the illustrative scheme, this would equate to 500 homes by unit. Of this 25% affordable housing by habitable room, 68% would be delivered as social rent homes and 32% as intermediate homes. Based on the illustrative scheme, this would equate to, by unit, 342 social rent homes and 158 shared ownership homes. The proposals would also seek to accommodate the existing 16 affordable units within the Boathouse Activity Centre within the development itself. The proposal has set out the delivery of a new neighbourhood centre, which would be comprised of a variety of non-residential uses. These are set out with minimum and maximum floor space allowances within the illustrative scheme. These would include flexible workspace, of which 10% would be delivered as affordable workspace, retail, food and beverage, social and community uses, sports and leisure facilities, a healthcare facility, and a nursery or creche. The overall non-residential floor space, excluding the replacement supermarket, would be capped at 15,950 square metres. The proposed affordable housing would be located in plots 2 and 1 of the development, split between the two proposed phases. These are indicated on the slide in front of you in red. The proposal would also provide a replacement supermarket to the southwestern corner of the site. The supermarket would be comprised of approximately 23,173 square metres of floor space, including an additional net trade floor space of approximately 1,116 square metres. The development would seek to replace the existing floor space on site, including Canal Side House. This floor space is indicated for redelivery and would be contained within the Section 106 obligations requiring temporary accommodation for those users of Canal Side House during the construction period. As with the residential floor space associated with the Boathouse Activity Centre, the associated non-residential floor space of this activity centre would be provided within a pavilion building in Plot 6 of the illustrative scheme. The development seeks the delivery of approximately 1.3 hectares of open space and would be comprised of tall buildings with maximum height set at 98 metres, equivalent to 29 stories, down to 2-storey pavilion buildings. The applicant has submitted the application in a hybrid form comprised of both detail and outline elements. The detailed elements of the scheme include the provision of the primary internal roads within the site, which are highlighted in the blue hatch lines in the images in front of you. The delivery of the replacement supermarket, including ancillary residential, commercial and community floor space, is outlined in green and the white fill. Outline applications set out the general principles for how a site can be developed, leaving the details of appearance, means of access, landscaping, layout and scale to later stages known as reserved matters. The outline elements of the application are highlighted in orange, and all of the development above the supermarket in the image before members is part of the outline application. The outline proposes residential, commercial, community and non-residential floor space and the replacement of the supermarket. All of the tall buildings are also contained to the outline element of the application. The application would see the clearance of the existing site. This would include buildings such as the supermarket, Building 1, petrol station, Building 1A, the Boathouse Activity Centre adjacent to the canal, and Canal Side House adjacent to Ladbroke Grove. The proposal would also see the clearance of the informally laid out commercial operations to the west of the application site. Which are evident in the now decommissioned and removed gas holders. The application site, for context, extends from Ladbroke Grove up to the decommissioned gas holders and does not exceed the railway line in the background of the image before you, and comes up to the towpath of the Grand Union Canal and Kensal Green Cemetery in the foreground of the image before you. The northern half of the KCOA is subject to an illustrative master plan which is segmented into plots. These are illustrated on the image before you. Plots 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6 comprise the application site. Plot 3 is not within the scope of the application site and is subject to a separate application by Barclay St Williams. The image before members provides a three-dimensional render of the illustrative scheme broken down by corresponding plots, within plots 1 and 2 aligning with the railway and plots 4, 5 and 6 adjacent to the canal. The Berkeley St Williams scheme, which is not part of this application, can also be seen in grey adjacent to plot 4. I will now turn to the detailed element of the application. One of the primary elements of the detailed application includes the delivery of new internal roads as per the requirement of the site allocation. The roads are illustratively referred to as the Avenue, South Drive and West Drive. The avenue would be the primary access of Ladbroke Grove and the main vehicular route into the site. The avenue would contain wide pavements to accommodate pedestrian cycle movement and feature landscaping, suds features, bus stops and insert disabled bays. South Drive's primary function would be as an access to the supermarket and its associated service and delivery and residential entrances. Bus standing areas would be located along the southern extent of South Drive. South Drive turns northward into West Drive, which is a one-way, quieter secondary road, which would also accommodate click and collect, inset bays, suds features, landscaping, a bus stop and disabled parking. The proposed basement supermarket would include a two-storey basement to accommodate plant, parking and servicing, and ground and mezzanine level floors. All floors above that are within the outline element of the application. The image provides contextual elevations of the replacement supermarket's northern and eastern elevations. This is a rendered image of the proposed supermarket's northern elevation from the perspective of West Drive, and this is a rendered image of the supermarket's eastern elevation from the perspective of the junction with the Avenue and West Drive. I will now turn to the outline elements of the application. As earlier, outline elements of the applications are designed to secure principles of development with the detail to be provided in later submitted reserve matters applications. The applicant has submitted a series of parameter plans which would govern the form of the development that would come forward. The limits of deviation plans as before you set out the minimum and maximum parameters of the proposed building's footprint and layout. Deviations are generally set at 600 millimetres. The application has also been accompanied by a height parameter plan. The tallest elements of the scheme can be seen in red, which could extend up to 98 metres, 29 stories, or, following from this in blue, buildings delivered at up to 25 and 26 stories, respectively. The maximum heights can be observed here, indicating a variety of height extending from 2 stories to 14 stories along the canal side and rising to 29 stories in the centre of the site and towards the railway. To the front of the site, as it addresses Ladbroke Grove, plots 1 and 6 would be set back with heights of up to 14 and 12 stories, respectively. Turning to the specific plots, plot 1 would accommodate commercial and residential floor space, including affordable housing, to be delivered in phase 2 of the development. Plot 1 would illustratively accommodate 748 residential units, with the tallest element of the scheme in plot 1 extending up to 85 metres or 25 stories. This image contains a render of the illustrative scheme associated with plot 1. This is a rendered image of the proposed development facing towards Ladbroke Grove. And this slide illustrates the proposed public realm adjacent to the railway in comparison with the existing site. Moving to plot 2, the application primarily relates to the residential housing, delivering up to 947 residential units, including affordable housing above the supermarket. The development within plot 2 would include buildings up to 29 stories, or 98 metres, with podium-level open space and buildings rising out of a single floor plate. The image before members indicates the maximum height parameters associated with plot 2. These are some rendered images of the extent of development contained to plot 2. So this is the podium level, and then this is looking onto Sainsbury's and the development contained above it. Moving on to plot 4, this would contain residential housing with some ground floor commercial space, illustratively providing up to 501 residential units. Plot 4 is located adjacent to the canal and contains one of the largest areas of public realm opening out onto the canal towpath. The tallest element of plot 4 would be contained to building 4.1, which aligns with West Drive. The building would be 98 metres high, or 29 stories, with heights lowering towards the canal at between 9 to 10 stories. This is a rendered image of the proposal adjacent to the canal with the open space visible. And this is a rendered image of building 4.1, one of the tallest buildings associated with the scheme. This is an image of the three-dimensional model of the proposal as it relates to plot 4, and you can see the open space in the centre there. Turning to plot 5, it would deliver residential development with commercial floor space at ground floor, which would front the canal. This would include a pavilion building and the reopening of the Western Wharf. The proposal would illustratively accommodate up to 235 residential units. Plot 5 would extend up to a maximum of 14 and 10 stories adjacent to the canal. This is a rendered image of the reopened wharf in Plot 5. And this is a rendered image of Plot 5 as it would appear adjacent to the canal. And this is a rendered image of Plot 5 from the juncture with the Avenue and West Drive. Turning to Plot 6, this plot is also located adjacent to the canal and would accommodate both commercial and residential development, delivering up to 88 homes in a single building. Plot 6 would accommodate the pavilion building associated with the replacement boathouse activity centre floor space and a large area of public realm adjacent to Ladbroke Grove. The buildings within Plot 6 would extend up to 12 stories and is staggered in height. This is a rendered image of Plot 6 as viewed from Ladbroke Grove, and a further image as viewed from Ladbroke Grove. I will now turn very briefly to some key views of the development. The view here is taken along Ladbroke Grove with the Water Tower, a private residential unit located in its foreground. This view is taken from Balby Road, facing towards the southern perspective of the development. And this view is taken from the junction with Ladbroke Grove and Balby Road. Turning to the heritage implications of the site, please see here the location of some key heritage assets, including the Grade 1 Registered Park and Garden and Conservation Area of Kensal Green Cemetery, the Grand Union Canal, a non-designated heritage asset, Canalside House, a non-designated heritage asset, Kensal House Group, which is Grade 2 star listed, the Ladbroke Grove Rail Crash Memorial, which is a non-designated heritage asset, the Oxford Gardens Conservation Area, and the Eastern Wharf, which has been determined to be a non-designated heritage asset. This is a view of the entrance gateway to the Kensal Green Cemetery with the development in its background. And this is the view of the development within Kensal Green Cemetery facing towards the site and the Grand Union Canal. This is a view of the development from the perspective of the Anglican Chapel. And this is the development coming up behind the Kensal House Group. This is a view from within Kensington Memorial Park, which is within the Oxford Gardens Conservation Area. Turning to transport, this application site is currently served by a number of bus services which link up with local transport networks, including the underground services at Ladbroke Grove, Kensal Green and Kensal Rise. To improve the site's PTAL rating and providing access to sustainable transport modes, bus services would be delivered within the site. These could include routes such as the 295, 23, 228, 452, 52, 70 and 316. To reflect the requirements of the local plan allocation, the development would deliver a redesigned junction on Ladbroke Grove. The applicant has modelled 2 junctions, including a 3-arm and 4-arm junction. The junctions would be signalised to allow for pedestrian movement across Ladbroke Grove, and the selected junction would be determined after further monitoring and secured via the Section 106 agreement. Turning to land contamination, as previously identified, the site formerly accommodated a gasworks. The site has been subject to previous remediation to accommodate the Sainsbury's and other related development across the site. However, further remediation to make it suitable for its end use will be required. The applicant has provided preliminary studies and plans for the remediation of this land. The development would be provided in 2 phases, with phase 1 commencing to the west of the site, furthest away from Ladbroke Grove. The applicant has indicated an 11-year construction programme to bring the development forward. Turning to the planning balance, as highlighted within the report, officers have identified harms and departures from aspects of the development plan. However, when viewed in the round and recognising that policies may pull in different directions, officers have concluded that the proposals comply with the development plan when read as a whole. The officer report has further set out the implications of the tilted balance in the National Planning Policy Framework. This concludes my presentation, and I'll hand back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So we now move to the opportunity for speakers, and we start with those who are objecting to the scheme. Now, both Dalgarno Ward councillors have registered to speak, and they are each able to speak for up to 2 minutes in their own right. And then afterwards, other speakers will speak, and they will all share up to 15 minutes. So I'm going to ask Councillor Ali if he would like to speak first. So please, Kasim, when you're ready, do go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee. Despite showing all the glossy and fancy photos, I do believe, and local community believes, that this plan is not fit for purpose and does not meet the local requirement. It breaches many London policies as well as our own borough policies in social affordability and social housing, transport, environment, noise, and light pollution for surrounding areas, including, and I will refer to this again, including Council House, which we've got many residents at this meeting. The London policies hedge for major developments must have at least 35% of affordable and social housing. And saying affordable housing, this plan has only got 19%, in fact 19 only. The policy H6 borough-wide should prioritize social renting as it meets the most acute housing needs in the borough as well as in London. RBKC London plan policies CH2 and CH3 also commits to the council to maximising genuine affordable homes to make sure that the social renting and the priority for the tenure to give opportunities for the local people. The Council Canal Side Supplementary Planning as well 2021 promises inclusivity, mixed communities, as well as helping the narrow gap of the people, especially in the north of the borough, North Kensington, which I am representing as a Dalgano councillor. The committee should know that this policy, although we have listened to the officers as well as the applicants' proposal, that this policy actually fails to meet the policies of local policies of RBKC T2 and T3, as well as London policies of T2 and T3, as well as RBKC's T1, TR1 and TR5, which requires a resilient and reliable network of transport. We know the area specifically, and I have been living in the area well before I was a councillor. So definitely it's another important issue to recommend to Mr. Chairman is the housing needs. RBKC requires at least 3,000 homes of our own residents. As a local councillor and as opposition leader, I have been speaking about this chamber. RBKC, 3,000 members of our community households are indeed in need of housing, and 2,100 of them are living in temporary accommodations outside the borough. So this definitely should not be a case for us, for the committee, the councillors, colleagues and fellow councillors to actually pass this application without meeting these requirements. Moving forward, this does not only damage the heritage and the social fabric of our community, it also harms the local heritage as well as being spoken about the local communities. It does not provide opportunity for the local communities, especially when it comes to the local opportunities as well as transport. The bridges of London Plan HC1, RBKC's CD7, as well as including many other areas. Mr. Mayor, this council, Mr. Chairman, this council has, leadership specifically, has said in the past that they will honour and listen and respect our members and our communities after Grenfell. It's about time this council, I'll finish with this point, it's about time this council shows the leadership and not break its own laws and rules and policies and listen, once and for all, to the local community. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jedid, you also have
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate.
Please go ahead.
It needs to be stressed out that members of the Planning Committee tonight they are not answerable to their whips. They make decisions according to their own judgment and they are responsible to their own residents. So I hope you will sympathise with North Kensington residents on this application. It needs to be also stressed out that I, as a councillor, saw no meaningful engagement with the concerned residents. Even in the brochure I got from developers, it's only focused on comments in support. I really would like to see something which would address concern of residents for all boroughs which are impacted by this development. Sadly, I have seen no engagement with our King initiative, Terra Carta, and there is a list of very serious issues. From pollution, lack of green spaces, impact on heritage, conjunctions, and in the same time, it's my belief that this application is based on assertions. My experience of North Kensington traffic is horrendous, and I think if there was a meeting between developers and residents on a grant, they would experience this themselves. Now, matter of contamination. It is a very serious matter, and South Hall case comes to mind, where Ealing Council stood by its residents. Needs to be sorted out. That Ealing understood the concerns of residents, and they refused planning application. It took Boris Johnson as a London mayor at that time to greenlight, and what followed was a list of very serious health issues, including cancer, which were reported by the residents up to this day. The police said that planning application committee will listen to the residents, and you will understand the impact it will have for many, many years to come, because the project is to be delivered not in one day, it will go for decades. And I think that after Grenfell, once again, we need to prove to our residents that we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we move to other speakers in objection who've registered to speak. And I think Michael Bach, I think Michael, you're going to open, is that right? So when you're ready, please go ahead.
This former gasworks site is totally landlocked. It's only got a one-way in and out from a congested junction on Ladbroke Grove. It is the most remote location in the borough in terms of accessibility by public transport. There is no hope of an Elizabeth Line station, and even a few buses are not going to make any change to the geography of North Kensington. So how did we get here? In 2011, the London Plan designated this opportunity area for 2,000 homes and 1,000 jobs. And that was to be subject to improved public transport accessibility, determining the final scale of development and assuming that there was going to be possibly a Crossrail station. In 2016, this was arbitrarily increased to 3,500 homes and 2,000 jobs, but with those same caveats that they had to sort out the accessibility. In 2021, the GLA failed to review the targets, despite the low public transport accessibility and no prospect of a station before 2040. So, despite 15 years of trying to get this far, most of the problems have not been or cannot be solved. This is the largest planning application of this borough for 60 years, and it's only the start. The whole of Kensal will be more like 4,000 to 5,000 homes, and that is massive.
This development continues to rely on a single junction at Ladbroke Grove, not providing adequate access and network connection. Network capacity is under pressure. TfL remains concerned that queuing and delay will be a major problem even with redesign. The single point of access for emergency service vehicles is of serious concern. The GLA maintains that it's not yet ready for development. One of its main reasons is inadequate transport infrastructure. The application does not demonstrate network integration required by London Plan and Local Plan Policy TR1. The master plan identifies 2 bridges intended to provide connection, the Great Western Main Line and Grand Union Canal, but no funding or delivery commitment is included, so this fails compliance with London Plan T2 and 3 and with Local Plan TR1 and 5, requiring deliverable networks rather than aspirations. The potential bridge and route through Kensal Green Cemetery is not secured and furthermore would fall short of design standards with no natural surveillance for personal safety. The route along the towpath falls short of design requirements. It's narrow and has steep ramps to bridges at 3 points close to the site. So these aspirations fail to deliver good walking and cycle routes required by London Plan T2 and 5 and Local Plan TR4 and 6. This means the site will remain isolated from its neighbourhood and from public transport, particularly rail and underground, and local community destinations. The site's score for public transport, PTAL, is assessed as 2, rising to 3 post-development. This is low relative to the scale of development. Additionally, TfL has not confirmed new bus routes or service frequency, and traffic delays predicted by modelling further undermine any additional buses. The construction logistics plan indicates a programme more than 10 years and a high volume of HGV movements. Harrow Road and Ladbroke Grove junctions are already under pressure. In summary, the proposals do not yet demonstrate a connected and resilient transport access network, safe and inclusive travel routes for walking and cycling, or adequate public transport. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Henry Peterson.
Thank you,
Henry, you're next.
Chairman. I will use my minute to repeat the key points made by GLA officers in their pen portrait of the Canal Side Opportunity Area. This was published in June of this year. This is recent, not history. And these are their words and not mine. Master plan and development quantum is reliant on new connections that are needed to increase accessibility of the site. The delivery of the 2 pedestrian and cycle bridges are identified within the SPD as fundamental to the successful creation of a new community at this site. The pen portrait's conclusion for the next London plan is that this opportunity area should remain in the lowest of the 5 categories under which the GLA assess progress in London's 48 opportunity areas, nascent in their terminology given the lack of transport infrastructure. In preparing their Stage 2 report, the GLA Planning Unit can either retain their objectivity and repeat the above views, or go along with the assertion from your own officers that this site is well connected. All of us living in the area know this claim to be untrue. Please recognise this reality in your decision this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. The former Kensal Gasworks site is heavily contaminated with deadly chemicals, and this is due to its historic use as a 19th century gas and coke plant. Now, these chemicals include hydrocarbons, heavy metals, blue billy cyanide, which is deadly to humans if ingested, benzene, asbestos, and volatile organic chemicals. The list is actually longer. In addition to these, there are 67 underground tanks and tar pits. These are huge. Now, many of these have not even been identified, mapped, or assessed by the applicant. So the contamination is indeed complex, and some of these chemicals, like asbestos, require specialist treatment. And yet, a full, comprehensive remediation plan of the whole site is deferred until planning consent is granted. Now, this directly violates National Planning Policy Framework, which states that land must be proven safe before permission is granted. Now, RBKC's environmental health officers have flagged alarming data gaps and missing information in the applicant's environmental submission and risk assessment, while areas of profound contamination, like the underground tanks, have, and these contain ammoniacal liquor, which is ammonia, they haven't even been mapped. So the applicant, we don't know where they are. So there are no safety evacuation protocols in place in the event of on-site exceedance of toxic gas. That means if the levels are found to be extraordinarily high, site workers will have their own evacuation protocols in place, but there's nothing for residents, nor is there any real-time air monitoring. Now, this breaches not only the National Planning Policy Framework, but also the London Plan, D11, and the RBKC Local Plan, G18, which require a coordinated mitigation and remediation strategy. So there is no remediation strategy that's been formulated that takes on board both Ballymore and St William. So these risks are not just theoretical. When contaminated soil is disturbed, it releases toxic gas and dust into the atmosphere. And these airborne toxins can travel up to a distance of 7 kilometers. And this has been proven by academic research, something called the Gaussian plume. And in our own analytics, using our own environmental specialists, we've actually used some of Southall's data as well. The WHO guidelines say there is no safe level of exposure. Health impacts include asthma, cancer, respiratory disease. So given all these factors, I would urge the Council to not approve this until safety protocols are in place.
Thank you. On heritage, Historic England has concluded that this proposal would cause widespread and in places profound harm to Kensal Green Cemetery, a Grade 1 listed landscape of exceptional national significance, and to nearby much-loved heritage assets, including Grade 2 star listed Kensal House, my family home. The addendum report concedes that the scheme causes harm, described as at the high end of less than substantial harm. This may sound modest, but in planning terms, it represents serious and lasting damage to the setting and experience of one of London's most important historic landscapes. Such harm must carry great weight in your decision under both national policy and the Planning Act. No convincing public benefit has been presented to justify it. The same report admits failures to meet the daylight and sunlight guidance, reducing light to Kensal House and to the canal boat dwellings, but it seeks to excuse this by citing the site's low-rise baseline that is not compliant with BRE methodology, which measures impact, not expectation, and offers no mitigation. This application conflicts with national and local planning policy, which require heritage-led design, protection of significant landscapes, and respect for residential amenity. The applicant's design code ignores the cemetery setting and fails to demonstrate exemplary quality. Taken together, these breaches represent a comprehensive policy failure on heritage and amenity grounds. If approved, this development would cast the cemetery into shadow, destroying the quiet light and peace that gives this landscape its meaning, and diminishing the daily lives of those of us who call this place home. I urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Committee, this is our last chance to tackle multi-deprivation in Golborne and Dalgarno wards. The aim of closing the gap of inequality is explicit in the officer's report and the local plan. The affordable housing provision is misrepresented. London Living Rent is a step towards shared ownership. GLA policy specifically states it is not accessible for people on the council waiting list. Of the 501 homes cited, just 342 are at social or London affordable rent. So after 15 years of construction, 342, that's 13.5%, not 20, 25 or 30, of the new homes will be available for the 3,000 households on the council waiting list. We need new homes here, but this plan will do little to nothing to tackle the severe housing deprivation or indeed poverty in our poorest wards.
Since the adoption of the trauma-informed practice into the local plan last year, 2024, there's a duty to engage the community using trauma-informed and co-design approaches, particularly for those affected by Grenfell. This has not happened. The local plan, again, if you refer to pages 12 to 14, requires inclusive sensitive planning, and the application fails to address the lived experience and the needs of the Grenfell impacted residents. So this hasn't happened. Main modification 370, paragraph 286. The application does not demonstrate compliance within the parameters of the trauma-informed practice requirement. Community health impact assessment. The applications fail to include a targeted community health impact assessment that considers the health effects on a specific community or group. The London Plan Policy GG3, Creating a Healthy City, requires assessment of major developments for health impacts and requires action to reduce health inequalities. This hasn't happened either.
Okay. This application threatens a vital ecological corridor. Kensal Green Cemetery supports protected species and provides essential urban biodiversity. The proposed towers would increase shadowing, wind, light pollution at night, and microclimate disruption, putting fragile habitats at risk. No clear 10% biodiversity net gain is secured, in breach of the Environment Act 2021, London Plan Policy G6 and RBKC Policy OS3. These policies require development to enhance, not erode, ecological value. We're in a declared climate and ecological emergency. So the loss of mature habitat and degraded air and soil quality cannot be justified. This harm is significant and policy non-compliant.
Thank you. I'm just going to wrap up. So,
Very good. Thank you.
Can I do my... Yeah. Okay, thank you. If approved, this development will bring the most dramatic change to Kensington's built environment for more than 60 years. But it won't be our longed-for change for the better. Instead, it will strand thousands of residents in a disconnected cul-de-sac, cut off from public transport, local services, and the wider community. During construction, deep excavation of this heavily contaminated site risks spreading toxic gas and dust over schools, homes, and parks across a wide area. Once completed, this dense, inaccessible enclave will bring us permanent congestion and worsening air quality. It will wall off Kensal Green Cemetery behind towers that erase its Grade 1 listed landscape, profoundly harming the tranquil setting of one of London's most exceptional heritage assets. And for what? Instead of providing desperately needed, truly affordable housing for local people, it offers a dense, lifeless forest of high-rise, buy-to-leave investment properties. Despite years of preparation, this egregious and frankly lazy application fails on multiple substantive and well-evidenced grounds. As you have learned, it conflicts with the RBKC local plan, the London plan, and the National Planning Policy Framework. And it breaches statutory duties on heritage, on environmental safety, on consultation integrity, and on public health. To approve it on a broad planning balance would be contrary to the development plan as a whole. It would not satisfy the Council's legal obligations and would thus be highly vulnerable to challenge. Kensington deserves better. Please refuse this unsafe, unsustainable, and irreversible scheme. Thank you.
My name is Councillor Neil Nerver. I'm Councillor for Queen's Park Ward in Brent, which abuts the development area.
Just hold on a second. Sorry, I didn't realise that you were actually going to speak.
Yeah.
You can say a few sentences, because time is actually already up, in fact. But please, 30, a few sentences.
I would just like to say very quickly, Impact of construction in terms of conditions, what can be done to improve, to seek, to write into the conditions engagement with local residents along the Harrow Road corridor, both at demolition and construction stages. Secondly, road junctions to improve the junction with Ladbroke Grove, Harrow Road and Kilburn Lane at the outset. And for RBKC to take the opportunity to work with Brent and Westminster to improve the Harrow Road corridor as part of the wider development. And finally, to press for step-free access at Kensal Green Station, which actually is the nearest station to the development and would greatly benefit from step-free access as part of this development. Thank you very much for allowing me to make these representations.
Thank you very much indeed. So we now will hear from the applicant team. We will have exactly the same format, and they will have a similar amount of time if they choose to use it. After they have spoken, it'll be the turn of members of the committee to ask either side questions. So that's the way we will proceed. And incidentally, you, at no point can anyone cross-question. In other words, the only people who can ask questions are members of the planning committee. So who on the applicant team, Mr. Russia, are you going to start?
I will start, Chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Committee and members of the public. My name is John Rocher. I'm a Director of Rolf Judd Planning, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicants, Ballymore and Sainsbury's Supermarkets Limited. We're incredibly pleased to have reached this critical point on Project Flourish, the redevelopment of the main land holdings within the Kensal Canal side area. I'd also like to recognise the hard work of your officers in assessing the planning application and in preparing the detailed committee report before you tonight. Ms Gore has set out the policy position relevant to the site, but I would like to highlight the following points. The site is well known locally. You've heard this evening. It is the former Kensal Gasworks, which operated for the site for over 100 years. With the exception of the Sainsbury's store, the site has been cleared and is largely vacant at the moment, with the remaining land that is there is occupied by temporary storage and industrial uses. It is brownfield land. Planning policy has long identified the entire Kensal Canalside area as a key development opportunity, targeting the delivery of a new residential neighbourhood in this part of West London. It is within an opportunity area, and local plan policy, as you've heard tonight, identifies Kensal Canalside as appropriate to deliver around 3,500 new homes, a new Sainsbury's store, a new neighbourhood centre, alongside a mix of office, retail and commercial uses. Collectively, this means that Kensal Canalside is the largest housing delivery site within the borough and key to meeting housing need. The aim from the outset has been to formulate a design-led master plan that will transform the former gasworks site into a flourishing new neighbourhood with new homes, shops, restaurants, cafes, community and leisure facilities contained within a collection of highly sustainable and well-designed buildings. So just to be clear, the new neighbourhood will include over 2,500 new homes, including 500 affordable homes, a brand new Sainsbury's store. We will create a new London High Street with shops and restaurants at the heart of a new neighbourhood centre. And once complete, the development will generate up to 1,500 jobs. Part of this will be through the provision of 5,000 square metres of new workspace designed for SMEs and the local business market, with 10% provided as affordable workspace. We will create a variety of new community uses, a new nursery, a new boathouse, a new leisure and sports centre and other community spaces within the scheme, and we will rehouse the London Sports Trust. We'll be reopening the historic canal basin, turning it into a new destination with restaurants and cafes, and we have 3 award-winning architects at architectural practices that have been responsible for designing both the master plan and each of the new buildings. And all these buildings will all be set around a series of new landscaped gardens and squares. This will also include 2 new public parks within the scheme, with public routes linking in and from the Grand Union Canal towpath for the first time. And collectively, this will help deliver significant biodiversity improvements, including the planting of over 750 new trees within the site. Fire safety has been paramount within the design process, and all new buildings will be designed to the highest standard of fire safety. And as required by council policy, the scheme includes the remodelling of Elaborate Grove Junction, the primary focus being to improve pedestrian and cyclist safety from the existing arrangement. We will extend the bus networks into the site to the new Sainsbury's store, and we will contribute towards improving the service. Our aim is to be an exemplar of sustainable design. The development will be gas-free, utilise renewable energy sources, incorporate low-carbon materials and high-performance facades. And I must say, over the last 4 years, the development team have consulted with over thousands of local people. We've had a series of consultation events throughout that whole process. And the development team itself has been based in the Grand Union building and has regularly met with local people and groups throughout the process. We recognise that this will be a significant change, but we believe this investment will bring about an exciting new beginning for the site with the opportunity to deliver substantial and wide-ranging public benefits to the local area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wishes to go next?
Chair, members of the Planning Committee, officers and members of the public, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm John Mulrine, Group Managing Director at Ballymore. For over 40 years, Ballymore has specialised in urban regeneration, creating large-scale mixed-use neighbourhoods that have achieved industry-leading standards for quality, sustainability and community integration. Our experience means we understand how to transform complex sites into thriving places and connect with their surroundings. As a family-owned and managed business, we take a personal and hands-on approach to every aspect of the development process. We design and build our projects ourselves using our own construction teams, and we continue to operate and manage them once complete with our own property management teams. That long-term stewardship means we stay invested, committed to each neighbourhood's success long after the last home completes. Sites like Kensal Canal Side are vital to meeting London's housing need. Between 70 to 80% of new housing in London is delivered through large multi-phase schemes, and the Mayor of London has accredited multi-phase schemes as the backbone of London's housing pipeline. Delivering 2,500 new homes here will make a real difference for families on waiting lists, for first-time buyers and older residents looking to downsize. But as has been widely reported, housing completions are falling and the challenge is becoming urgent. It will take pragmatism, partnership and compromise to deliver the homes needed. We take that responsibility seriously. We're ready to deliver and determined to play our part. Our proposals for Kensal Canal Side are of exceptional design quality. The master plan draws inspiration from the area's Regency and Victorian heritage, reimagined through a contemporary lens. It introduces 2 new public parks, play spaces for all ages, and more than 3.2 acres of new parkland, equivalent to around 2 football pitches. This is a complex site, but that's exactly what we do. Ballymore has delivered some of London's most demanding regeneration projects, such as Royal Wharf, London City Island in East London and Brentford Town Centre regeneration in West London. We previously unlocked post-industrial land beside active rail lines and busy communities while maintaining essential services and re-providing local facilities along the way. We recognise local concern about construction impact. Our delivery model means we sell at the same time so we have a real stake in the area, how the area looks and feels throughout construction. We're committed to managing works carefully, keeping sites tidy, limiting noise and traffic wherever possible, and maintaining close dialogue with neighbours every step of the way. We take pride in how our construction projects are presented. We're excited by what this project can bring. New homes, jobs, open space, improved connections and social value for the borough. We're committed to working with you to create a place the community can be proud of, one that supports inclusive growth and enriches daily life. And we know great places are more than about buildings. They're about streets, culture, activity, opportunity, and most importantly, people. We stand at a critical moment for London's delivery. The economic environment is tough. With high construction costs, rising finance rates, and real pressure on viability. Despite that, we remain steadfast in our commitment to bring this site forward, but momentum matters. By granting permission this evening, the Council will unlock investment, jobs, and homes at a time when the city most needs them. The time to seize this opportunity is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's going to speak next? Sir.
Good evening, Chair, members and officers. I'm Michael Adamoson, Head of Mixed Use Development at Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's has been part of this community for almost 40 years. We're proud to be a major employer and play an active role in the borough's economy and everyday life. Our existing store has served the area well, but it now needs renewal to meet future requirements. Our proposal offers the opportunity to deliver a sustainable new store while also helping to meet London's urgent need for new homes. We will maintain continuity of trade throughout the construction period, protecting jobs and ensuring local people have access to the store's essential services during this period. Together with our partners Ballymore, we can transform this underused site into a dynamic new neighbourhood that delivers new housing, public spaces, community facilities and local growth through new jobs and opportunities. Over the past 7 years, we have worked closely with the Council, local residents and other stakeholders to shape the proposals. In summary, we believe these proposals represent a once-in-a-generation opportunity to renew the site, delivering a modern store, vital new homes, long-term jobs and investment for the borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's going to speak next?
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Melanie Dempster and I live in RBKC. I'm an RBKC council tenant and I've lived in West London my entire life, the last 20 years, in fact, in RBKC. I not only live in the borough, I run a small business on Kensal Road and I have 2 young children. I'm here this evening in support of Project Flourish. When I first heard about the project, I had many reservations about the impact that this would have on the local community. These were not only my concerns, but those of friends, families, and my clients, many of which are local people. But I've done my research. I met with the Ballymore team to ask some tough questions and found out more about this development. And I am now sure that this project will greatly benefit the North Kensington community. Living and working in the borough, I can see that we need an uplift and investment that only a big regeneration project can bring. This area now feels segregated with everyone in little pockets around the place. Project Flourish will bring people together, creating a sense of community, something I feel has faded away over the years. People need housing and jobs. The children need a sense of community and open spaces where they can play. The project offers us all of this and more. Along with this project will come 2,000 new jobs, business opportunities, 1,200 apprenticeships, more foot flow to the area, which in turn is better for local businesses, and more importantly, this project will provide new homes. As I said before, I am a council tenant, but I know too many people who have been on waiting lists, waiting to be housed for years. I also know of people who have had to leave the borough or leave London and have had to move away from family and support systems to be housed in areas such as Birmingham, for example. And this project will provide 500 new affordable homes for families who need homes the most. As a parent of young children, I also worry for my kids who were born in this borough but will not be able to live or work here unless more homes are built. The tenants of these new apartments will have decent homes, which will forever be just that, a decent home. The land they are building on has been empty for as long as I can remember. So why not put it into use and create something special for North Kensington? So tonight, I ask you as community members, business owners, and council representatives to look at what our area needs, what we, the residents, need, what Ballymore are promising to deliver, and to vote in favour of the Project Flourish planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any further speakers on the applicant side?
No, Chair, that's us finished. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for speaking. So, colleagues, it's our chance to ask questions. If we can try and keep the questions quite concise, and please make it clear who you're asking a question of. Who'd like to go first? Councillor Mackover. Sam.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you both objectors and applicant for very high quality addresses to us. I want to say first to the objectors that I've sat on planning committees since 2012 at first, and I can say that this is the most structured and coherent set of comments that I have seen. Your points are very clear, and that's why I don't at this stage have any further questions to you, but I have listened to them all, and it backs up in all of the reading that I have done. So thank you for making that so organised, and also thank you, from my point of view, of listening carefully to what the applicant has got to say, and also during our deliberations, it's much easier to concentrate on this complex application. So thank you. But I will pick up, and I'm sure my colleagues have got a lot of other themes that they will pick up as well. With the applicant, I picked 3 that I just wanted to look at this stage, and I'll say, and presumably the applicant's advisor will put their hand up on these particular ones just so I can ask the question. Just on contamination, on affordable housing / viability, and on transport. So just on contamination, who should I look at when I ask some comments?
If it was you, probably best if I chair and I will point to the right direction. So we do have our contamination experts in the room tonight, so happy to ask that. That will be Deanne Gibbs from Talon.
Thank you. Yeah. And obviously we will pick up with officers later when we're assessing the information, so I'm just hearing what you have to say about certain things. Now, I sit on the Environment Select Committee, and we have quite a lot of presentations on pollution. We know that there are challenges all over the borough and all over London. My question on this particular site is it unique in its challenges as a former gasworks that is looking for decontamination and redevelopment? I've seen around London various things which look like historic gasworks. What is the level of sort of knowledge that has come from safe decontamination of similar sites?
That's a very good question. The site is not at all unique. It is extremely common. There are many, many gasworks sites within London, across the UK, internationally. There's been decades of research and successful remediation across these sites. And there seems to be quite a lot of confusion regarding the actual contamination at this site and the level that it is, in some way, as you said, unique and incapable of being safely redeveloped. And that is simply not the case.
Could I have just one follow-up on that? Looking in the addendum, there's some very detailed reports about the risk of the decontamination process. And I'll let my other colleagues ask different questions. I'll stop after this one on those other topics I mentioned. So I can see from images in the packs that people are very, very worried about pollutants being thrown up into the atmosphere and carrying because the site is being disturbed. There isn't anything sitting over it. There's going to be gassing off of various unknown tanks in different positions. It's very easy for any resident to be highly concerned because it just feels like the most dangerous thing that could be done. How have you, on other sites, dealt with residents' concerns? Because this is not a natural process that's going through, and everyone knows there are risks. And yet we need also balance for any of this, the risk of scooping up and taking away millions of tons of soil for treatment elsewhere, because that has also environmental consequences. So what would you do to assure local residents and us as decision makers tonight that this is completely controllable?
Just realized I didn't turn it off. There are many, many standard protocols that are put in place, and I'll go through those. And I'd like to pick up on some of the concerns raised in the information pack, because I think it is important to counter some of the claims that have been made with respect to the site. In terms of what we would do, it's what we do on all of our sites. This is extremely common. The first site I ever worked on 24 years ago was a heavily contaminated fuel depot, and there was a pub on the side of it, and the person who lived in it was extremely concerned because he had a young daughter, and he was worried what would happen once we started remediating the site, what would be the health impacts on his daughter. And we did comprehensive monitoring at that site, and that site was developed, again, it was over a long period, and he was satisfied. We shared the results with him. There was transparency, there was oversight, there was proactive monitoring, and he was very satisfied at the end of the development that it had been safely done. And that is what is done on all of these sites. We tend to hear about the sites where things go wrong. It tends not to make the news, the hundreds and hundreds of heavily contaminated brownfield sites where things go right. And as Ballymore have said, they are extremely experienced in developing complex sites. We personally have worked with them on a former gasworks site, the one at Nine Elms in Vauxhall, and that was more contaminated than this site is, with far less favorable ground conditions. And that site was effectively remediated. In fact, at the end of it, I remember sitting in a meeting with the Environment Agency, and they said how delighted they were with what had taken place at the site and how we'd almost gone over and beyond. In terms of this site, there are a number of threads to the concerns. One concern is these underground tanks and a belief that there are 67 unmapped tanks and tar pits beneath the site that will be broken open and uncontrollably off-gassing into the air, casting dust and contamination over 7-kilometre radius. Clearly, that would not be a site you would wish to develop if that was the case. There are not 67 unmapped, unidentified underground tanks. The records indicate that over the history of this gasworks, there were 79 tanks that were mapped. That includes the tanks that have since been removed from the site, both during the gasworks clearance after it ceased operation in 1970, during clearance and remediation when the Sainsbury's supermarket was constructed in the mid-1980s. And there was also a period of statutory remediation across the Ballymore portion of the site in the early 2000s, when tar tanks, gross contamination, spent oxide, gasworks waste was removed from the site. It was designed with RBKC oversight. Reports were submitted. There was air quality monitoring, there was water monitoring, there was soil monitoring. Verification reports were submitted. Those are all sitting within the council's records. Those have been interrogated. The site is a gasworks site. They are complex. They do contain contaminants. And some of the chemicals that were listed, hydrocarbons, heavy metals, benzene, VOCs, asbestos, those are extremely common to brownfield sites. They sound alarming if you're not used to hearing the names, but they're common contaminants. They're part of the standard suite you test for on any brownfield site, not just a gasworks site. In terms of things like ammoniacal liquors, those would be sitting within tanks. Those are probably long gone from the site. Obviously, until you turn over the site, you can't say 100% they're definitely not there. But if you do encounter them, there's safety protocols in place that you would follow to safely deal with them. Well-established protocols that have been used on many former gasworks sites, many chemical work sites, fuel depots, landfill sites. So this is not a case of we don't know where things are. This isn't a case of you're just going to get there and start digging uncontrollably with no control measures in place. We know there were tanks. Most of them are gone. We know that some may still be there. Measures will be in place should they be encountered during the works. In terms of things defying the National Planning Policy Framework, the report from the planners at RBKC have stated otherwise. Section 1.45 says it does satisfy. In terms of data gaps, yes, there are always data gaps. These will be filled through further targeted investigation. And as is standard, this targeted investigation takes place on an iterative basis following planning consent. In terms of safety protocols for evacuating the residents, The reason that contaminated land sites don't have those safety protocols in place is because we would never reach a situation where the residents actually have to flee from the site because there's this uncontrolled release of contamination. The only site I've worked on where there have been evacuations is where another topic which wasn't mentioned by the objectors but I know is of concern is this issue of UXO and the possibility that there's numerous bombs sitting within this site. UXO is a UK-wide issue. UXO was dropped. There were thousands of bombs dropped across the UK. It's found in cities. It's found in farmland. It's found on military sites. It's, there was a big one in the news that was found on an allotment. This site is no different from any other site. It's been assessed. But in terms of safety protocols for evacuation, the only time you would typically end up with residents being evacuated is if you, for example, encountered a bit of UXO on a site. And again, standard protocols are in place. This is nothing unusual for the construction industry. It's something we deal with day in, day out. As soon as you sink a bucket in the ground, you know there's the potential for something coming up, and we have contingency measures in place for almost every eventuality. Because we have to. It's not like you can look around and see stuff.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I know the issue of contamination is obviously something a lot of people are interested in, so I've allowed you to speak at considerable length, but going forward, perhaps if some of the answers can perhaps be a little bit more concise, that would help us. But I appreciate what you say about contamination because it is directly addressing points that have been made. Sam, did you have other points?
I will let my colleagues explore their topics, and if the other things that I want to ask about are not asked, then I'll come back. Thank you.
Councillor Siren.
Thank you and good evening. Actually, I'm going to ask a follow-up question on contamination before we move on to another subject, and thank you for all your explanation. And actually, I also wanted to thank the objectors for all the work they've done. I mean, this is a very organised and really helpful, the documents that you've sent us. It's been really helpful for me to understand all the comments and concerns and objections. So just on the contamination, you've talked a lot about what's going to be done and you've talked about other sites. But one of the objectors talked about the need to find the site safe at this stage of the planning process. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've done so far and what you've found and how many gaps you think there are that need to be investigated as the process, should it continue, what gaps there are and what you've actually managed to find out to date?
Yes, the site has already been comprehensively investigated following the Environment Agency's land contamination risk management guidance. So as part of that, there has been a detailed and comprehensive desk study, which involves looking at desk-based records. These included records from the National Gas Archives. Because it's a former gasworks, in some ways, gasworks are actually brilliant in terms of brownfield sites to redevelop because there's so many records for them. So when gasworks ceased, they were very, very good records that were all kept. They weren't just destroyed. So we have records that show all of the historic layouts. We know where the tanks were. We know where the structures were. There's also been interrogation of the local archives in the library just a few footsteps away. There has been interrogation of the records held by RBKC. In addition to this, there has been an intrusive ground investigation. So there has been investigation across the site. There has been soil testing. There's been groundwater sampling. There has been surface water monitoring. There's been gas monitoring. There has been a comprehensive investigation. Where we refer to data gaps is because the site is still in use. So there's not clear access to all parts of the site at this stage. As parts of the site become available for access, there'll be further targeted investigation. In terms of what we don't know exactly where things are in certain cases, but we do have an extremely good handle on what is beneath the ground. And I would like to quickly add that the ground conditions at this site are very favorable because it's clay. The site is sitting on clay. Clay is brilliant because it means if something spills, it doesn't keep going. It's contained. So what we know is that we know where things were on the site. We know the site has previously been remediated in part, and we have recent contemporary data as to what is currently on there. In terms of data gaps to fill, there'll be targeted investigation, and on a phase-by-phase basis, there will be a detailed remediation strategy. And we know already what the remediation strategy will be across the site. What that detailed strategy will be, as the name says, a detail. So, for example, the outline strategy says we need to have a capping layer. That's standard. It means in all those areas of open space, you're not sitting directly on the soils. There's going to be clean soil put above it. So what a detailed strategy would say is that is going in this part of the site because this is the part of the site where there's landscaping. It's going to be yay thick, and this is the construction. So when we say data gaps, we know what the site contains. We know what the remediation strategy will be. What is left is the fine detail as to exactly how that is deployed on the site. It's not that this is great unknown and we're making it up as we go along.
Other questions? William. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you again both to the applicant and the objectors for being here tonight. Really comprehensive statements. My first question relates to the construction of the site. I noted in some of the objections there was a request to have sort of goods, plant, various materials transported via the canal. And I'm also wondering about freight rail. I'm just curious to know, to what extent has there been any strategy in place to reduce the use of HGVs, and to what extent have you considered using either freight rail or waterborne transportation as part of the construction process?
Thank you. I will deal with this initial question, and some of my colleagues may chip in as we go through. We have done some initial work on the use of canals. There's an opportunity there potentially to use the canal to bring material in. That is subject to various licenses, as you'd expect, at this stage. So we can't guarantee what that will be and how much that will take off the roads, for instance, but it is an aspiration, and we are committed to that. I believe it's a condition as well of the permission to investigate that opportunity. So that is one avenue that we are looking at quite intensively. I don't believe, because of the operational nature of the freight and the rail lines, that there is any opportunity to use the rail lines for any incoming of materials. But we are committed. I mean, one of the things we've got to remember, this is a long-term project, so in terms of supply lines, in terms of what materials will be coming to the site, is still a point that will be subject to those detailed parts of the application when we come to reserve matter stage. So as you'll recall from the presentation, a large amount of the application is in outline at the moment, so materiality, volumes, etc., are all to be resolved as we go through. So each time we submit a reserve matters application, there will be the associated construction management plan, what that takes, where those vehicles come from, whether it's by canal or whether it's by other means. But I think that realistically, it's going to be primarily road, but where we can, we'll be looking at using the canal as an opportunity.
If I could just make one point on that as well. Ballymore, a big part of our supply chain is off-site fabrication. So one of the things that can reduce vehicle traffic into the site is having off-site fabrication as opposed to on-site. So precast panels, we've built thousands and thousands of homes in London already using off-site fabrication methods, would greatly reduce the number of wagons coming into the site, and also greatly reduces the number of operatives on the site during the early phases of construction. So that can greatly reduce the impact on the local area, and certainly we'll be investigating this as part of our detailed design of the project.
Chairman, if I may have another question.
Yes, and then Councillor.
My next question, I'll put this one to the objectors. I noticed in the pack some concerns in relation to fire safety. I think specifically the fact that there's only a single point of access for the site. I was just wondering, could you add some further colour to that and explain in a bit more detail what concerns you have over fire safety? Thank you.
Thank you, yes. It was raised in particular by, I think it was London Fire Brigade in one of the earlier submissions, but really emphasising the point that if you have an incident which prevents access of emergency vehicles directly from Ladbroke Grove, there is no other way into the site. earlier master plan included a link over the canal from the western end towards Scrubs Lane, and it was raised particularly in concern that wasn't going to be provided, and therefore you would be stranded without any backup opportunity.
And then perhaps just briefly, Chairman, can I ask the applicant just to also respond to that same question in relation to fire safety?
I will quickly begin, and then I may pass over to one of my other colleagues again this evening. Yeah, we've gone through a very rigorous process on fire safety in terms of liaison both with London Fire Brigade and also with the Council's own building control team on fire safety. That has involved, there's no doubt there is a single access point in terms of the main road onto the site. There is actually a secondary access for emergency vehicles off the same road. But it's a little further down, but they do both come from Ladbroke Grove, but we have built that resilience into the system. But the primary objective from there has been to ensure that all the residential designs are very resilient, bearing in mind the nature of that single access and also the fire safety measures that within each of the individual buildings. And we've already started to map that out at this stage, despite the fact we've got effectively an outline application on the residential bits, but those are already built into the requirements that we will deliver on each of those sites, because fire safety, as I said, I think at the earliest part of the presentation, is paramount. I don't know if anyone else wants to add in terms of the measures that we've been looking at.
Sorry. I think just to add, this as we've outlined already, this is an outline application, and we will be, is it working?
Yes, if you speak up a little bit, but yes, it is working.
So we will be working on detailed designs through the design of the Reserved Matters application, and the introduction of the Building Safety Act means that we need to go through a gateway process. The Gateway 2 process means that we need to submit detailed plans to the newly formed Building Safety Regulator. That Building Safety Regulator will need to approve our plans before we start any permanent work on a residential building, and we will not be able to occupy a residential building until we've been through the final stage, which is the Gateway 3 process, and we won't be able to occupy until we've passed Gateway 3.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for speaking. I will try and break this up into some small parts, but the overarching questions I have are really about ongoing issues that have come up in briefings before, and asking for some quite specific, measurable responses and strategies. So we've heard some very comprehensive objections, very well referenced, and I am here listening because I want the argument. I want to know what the answer is. I haven't heard it, so that's why I'm digging into it now. My first question is, and this should be quite specific, what is guaranteed for Canalside House and the community services which run from it? And I really, to be explicit, I don't mean what are you hoping for, what are you thinking about, what are you talking about, what is locked down that we can really count on? And I will just put these all out. Given we have some, again, very substantive objections from, well, some of our own officers, TfL, GLA, neighbouring councils, how are you going to explicitly counter those concerns? I'm thinking, for instance, okay, so I'm a ward councillor for the Portobello Road area where we've had significant flooding. A big part of the flooding report it mentions that it is not it does not satisfy their requirements, and it will put pressure on other parts of the borough. I see, and the thing is, I see quite a lot of these things where I'm just sort of, there's a lot that seems to be figured out as we go along. Now, you're asking us to grant planning permission on a lot of faith. I, for one, would really appreciate some real clarity. And the final thing is these affordable and social housing numbers have not gone up. Remember from previous briefings, it was something that was supposedly taken on board. We were going to have more affordable and social rent housing. What's going on there? And really just answer, I mean, how you like, but I'm really looking for, the thing that's bothering me, that I really would like to hear, is substantively, what is going to happen? What can we really count on? And so I appreciate I asked you a few things, but I hope you can put something together for me.
I will go first, and if my colleagues need to come in, they will do so. Canalside House, you are correct, Canalside House is identified for demolition. The tenants will, and we allow for them to be rehoused within our scheme at the moment, and also as part of that there is a temporary relocation strategy in play within the Section 106 which requires us to find alternative accommodation, and then they have first rights to come back on equal terms as they are today back into the scheme once complete. So there is a designated space within the scheme for that particular purpose, and we are committed to liaising with them and also the council throughout that process, because I'm conscious it's a council-owned building, and they are tenants actually of the council themselves at the moment, but we are committed to rehousing them within the scheme and temporary relocation. Your second question is to do with flood risk. We have a comprehensive drainage plan. There should be no flood risk arising from this scheme itself at the moment. The scheme includes a huge amount of sustainable drainage within it. All of that is dedicated to ensuring that we mitigate all potential runoff, and it is runoff, it's not flood risk by a different form. All potential runoff from rainwater within our own site and within our scheme, and that is a commitment again with that. And in terms of affordable housing, I think your reference there was to have we not gone up since we submitted the planning application. As you may well be aware, I mean, the planning policy is to provide the maximum reasonable viable. This scheme has been heavily scrutinised in terms of its overall viability. Ultimately, we've got to get a scheme that is deliverable. If it's not deliverable, nothing happens on this site at all. No housing, no Sainsbury's, nothing will happen. So it is fundamental we find a balance and provide a deliverable scheme. Part of that equation is maximising as far as we reasonably can the level of affordable housing. That viability work that's been done has been submitted open book to the council, it's been submitted open book to the GLA, and all parties have concluded that at present we're providing, they say, more than the maximum reasonable viable. So in that sense we are meeting the policy test at 25%. We have looked at every opportunity. We will continue to look at every opportunity. But again, I'd stress that the key here is that we have got to achieve a viable, deliverable scheme. And at the moment, we have got that balance at 25%. If we put more in there, then we start to raise issues in terms of deliverability and viability.
Thank you, Chair. If I can briefly follow up. Thank you. Okay, so my follow-up question is, so particularly with Canalside House, we're talking about where, for how long, because this is a very, this is a very difficult thing when we have community resources, which are very important, and the sort of insecurity that's going to mean. So where and for how long? Am I to, okay, and follow up on the flooding risk. And runoff, right? I understand this is a report from our flood risk officer, and about the pressure that the scheme is going to put. I mean, am I missing something? Because it seems like he still objects to it. No? Okay. Well, so maybe you can speak to me about that then, and I'll leave it there. I mean, I have, to be To be honest, I think these are follow-up questions for officers after this section, so thank you.
I will just quickly answer. In terms of Canalside House, the intent has been to demolish Canalside House early in the development process. Part of the reason for that is to create the new public park at the site of Ladbroke Grove early, to give something back to the community as early as we reasonably can. That will mean that the residents will, or sorry, the tenants of Canalside House will be moving off site probably for a period of 3-4 years. Our intent is to get them back on site as quickly as we reasonably can. But as you'll see, not only have we got to go through a process of remediation that we've discussed before, the first stages of the development are to relocate the Sainsbury's. That's key in terms of protecting those jobs. But then what we anticipate is that they would be delivered into a new accommodation very early in what we call phase 2 of the scheme. So we're talking about 4 or 5 years, potentially. In terms of flood risk, it's difficult to see on the plans, but beneath a lot, what we will be installing on a lot of plans, and it's all to achieve and to manage what we call is just the runoff rates, is a significant number of drainage tanks alongside with sustainable urban drainage, and that is all dedicated ensuring that there is no net increase in flood risk on the surrounding area due to this site. I mean, if you go to the site today, it is an awful lot of hard standing. It's also across the whole site, you've got the Sainsbury's car park. None of that is very good for drainage at all at the moment. It does increase runoff, and it does increase runoff into the canal. And what we are seeking to do is to manage that and mitigate against that as best we can.
Sorry, just a point of clarity has there been a further response from our officer James Latham, who made a report on flooding risk? That this is specifically what I'm talking about.
As far as I'm concerned, as we understand it, I have not seen a fair response, but as far as we're aware, they are satisfied with our current proposals. I mean, it is worth adding, and I know it's not the point you possibly want to have, because we're outlined, the detail of those actual landscape buttons and all that we are putting in are subject to further detailed design, which will be approved by the council in due course. But in terms of the volumes that we're looking at and the size of all that, we do know that, and that has been submitted.
Okay, well, actually, I would appreciate if there was some clarity from officers about what... Yes, okay, thank you.
Good. I've got some questions about transport. We've heard from some of the objectors, and I think, I mean, I can certainly, see myself whenever I've been up there. The mini roundabout that there's at the moment is often incredibly congested. The whole place often seems something of a bus park with a petrol station attached. Currently, there seems to be a 3-arm and a 4-arm proposal for the new junction. Can somebody from the applicant team, please explain precisely how this is going to work? Is this something that is to be worked up with our officers, TfL, of course, as well as the applicant? Can somebody just clarify precisely what's happening in this important area?
Thank you, Chair. It's a good question. I'll deal with that one. At the moment, so we know that planning policy, and we know that TfL's objective has been to put a new junction on Ladbroke Grove. The reasoning, and it's just worth reiterating the reason for that, is that the existing roundabout is not deemed to be safe in terms of pedestrians and cyclists. And that has been a long-held desire of particularly Transport for London to see an alternative option. There's been an awful lot of transport modelling done for this project, and that has been done primarily in conjunction with Transport for London, and to try to resolve the best solution for that junction. 2 options were put forward to TfL, one which is a 3-arm, one is a 4-arm. For those who don't know, that's just the number of signals and roads that come out into the junction. Both of them are intrinsically the same. The difference is whether or not Kensal Road is part of a signalised junction or not. That is the difference between the 2. The reason there were 2 is because they have slightly different times in terms of transport moving through the signalised junction. So that is why there are 2 options. At the moment, the preference is for a free arm junction, and that is the one which is currently being pursued. That is both the preference of the council and it is also the preference of TfL. So that is the expected option. But because of the nature of the development and because of the intent to keep reviewing how best the layout will minimise congestion, you can't get rid of congestion on Ladbroke Grove. There is no scheme that does that, fundamentally. So in terms of ensuring that there is a balance between pedestrian safety, pedestrian crossing, cycle routes, cycle safety and congestion, that all gets weighed into the balance. At the moment, it's free arm that's preferred, but we have left the forearm on the table in case TfL wish to review that going forward.
That's helpful. Colleagues, any final questions? Sam and then Anne.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on the technical points on viability, following up from Councillor Benton's questions and also the concerns of the objectors. I do completely understand the points that you've made on viability. I read in the details, if I understood them correctly, that there are also 4 stages, or 3 stages, but 4 viability review tests. And it might be helpful for us to understand from you, very briefly, how those continue to monitor that the viability is being exercised to the fullest extent for affordable.
Thank you for that question. That's a good question. It's actually quite a complicated one, but I'll try to make it as simple as we can. Because the scheme at the moment is proposing 25% affordable housing, that is below what the GLA term as the threshold approach for the site, which is 35%. It's actually slightly more than 35%, but that's a longer discussion about how we get there. But it's below the threshold approach, and therefore it is required that we include both early, mid and late stage reviews on the application. Those are triggered to various stages within the development process, and at that point the viability of the scheme will be reviewed. It will be reviewed against certain set parameters, and if it is deemed that the scheme at that stage can afford more affordable housing, then it is a requirement of the permission that Ballymore Sainsbury's would provide more affordable housing at that point. And that is against a series of parameters. It is an open book process, so it's entirely transparent, and it is at the council's discretion to sign that off. So that is submitted at each of those stages to the council, who review it. A decision is then made as whether or not the scheme can afford more affordable housing, and if it can, it is included within the scheme.
Thank you, Chair.
Last question.
My question is about transport again, and we've heard from the objectors that the transport improvements are currently uncommitted. So what are you doing to encourage investment in transport links to support this development, and what do you think can realistically be done? And, you know, I noticed that there is quite a big contribution to the buses. Do you think the buses are going to be enough to service the site?
Thank you. Again, a good question. Fundamentally, we know the Elizabeth line is not coming forward on the site, not certainly in the short term. We have allowed for a safeguarding if a station does ever come forward, but we know that it is not coming forward, and there are detailed reasons from TfL for that. For the reason for that. Therefore, we have entirely designed the scheme in that knowledge, and indeed policy has always recognised that for the last years. So, in terms of where we are prioritising ourselves on transport, particularly public transport, the primary one is the bus links and improving bus links into the site. That's bringing them all the way into the site. That's removing the current congestion you see at the front of the site where the buses stopping, starting. There are 7 bus routes that come onto the site currently. We'll be bringing the majority of those into the middle of the site, but with some of them around the entirety of the site. And as you rightly say, there is quite a large contribution to improving those services and making sure that those are still very fit for purpose with the development proposal coming forward. And I stress that those contributions were worked out by London Buses themselves, so that is them planning what they require in terms of new bus links coming forward, and supported fully by TfL. Not so glamorous, but we're doing an awful lot to try to encourage improvements to cycling around the site, how the cycle routes link up in the local area. We're trying very hard to also improve all the pedestrian environments around the site. If you walk up and down Ladbroke Grove at present, the roads and pavements are very tight, and we're looking at opportunities how we can improve that pedestrian environment there particularly. And alongside that, one of the contributions in the Section 106 as well is prioritising some improvements to Ladbroke Grove's tube station. That's looking at improvements for capacity reasons, particularly at the gate line, but it's also looking at step-free access onto that as well. So it is a combination of those. There's also a number of travel plan initiatives that we've got, which are part of the Section 106 requirements about how we encourage non-vehicle forms of transport and prioritise public transport. And alongside, there's an awful lot of commitments on those particular aspects of the scheme that come as part of any planning application, but there's a lot of commitment on this side. So in terms of the overall impact of the scheme, the connectivity of the scheme, it does achieve quite a high PTEL rating. It is PTEL 5 on a level of 6 down to 1, 6 being the highest, so we achieve a PTEL 5. We also increase all the way through to the middle of the site to where St William site is up to 3. That is deemed to be an accessible site, and we are doing all we can to improve those additional items to make sure it is an accessible site. And the final point just to make is, of course, in the knowledge that the Elizabeth line wasn't coming forward, the scheme and indeed the policy response slightly changed. This idea of a neighbourhood centre, more local uses on site within the scheme became a very important part of that. Originally, there was a lot more emphasis on office development and jobs on this site, which was very reflective of connectivity of the Elizabeth line. So we've gone very, very carefully looked at how could we bring some of those important local facilities within the scheme so that we've got a neighbourhood, so the neighbourhood does cater for itself, so that does bring people in, but it also ensures that we're catering for our new future residents within the scheme itself. So that's also part of that connectivity to local services as well as public transport.
Very good. Any final questions? No. In that case, thank you everyone for coming along and speaking and answering our questions. We will now, I suggest, take a short break of about 10 or 15 minutes, and when we return, the committee will be able to ask officers questions. So please, we will just have a brief adjournment. Thank you. if we can resume in just a minute or two. So please, if you'd like to return to your seats, if you wish. Okay, I think we can resume the meeting. We now move to a section of the meeting where members of the committee can ask officers questions. Who would like to go first on that front? Who'd like to go first? Will, and then Toby.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to drill down into the point a little bit more about the provision of affordable housing and specifically housing for social rent. We heard from some of the objectors that only 13.5% of the housing that's planned to be provided would be available for social rents. It does feel somewhat low compared to both the amount that's meant to be provided. I think it's about 35% affordable housing, and also with reference to the current waiting list within the borough for social housing. Considering this is the largest site in the borough that is available for housing, at least at the moment, how do you square that with the current percentage of social housing that's available on offer? And actually, should we really be pushing for more?
Thank you. So the applicant has set out the provision of affordable housing being 25% by habitable room. That amount that would be provided, which is roughly 500 units if we're looking at the illustrative scheme, would be broken down into 342 social rent properties, which is around 68% of the total affordable housing being proposed on this site. As per our local plan policy and indeed the London plan, the applicant submitted a financial viability assessment, which we had rigorously reviewed by our own financial consultants, and the conclusions of that review were that the applicant was providing above the reasonable amount of affordable housing. So the hope is, from the applicant's position, that obviously markets will pick up in the coming years, but ultimately they are over-providing from what they can actually afford to deliver on this scheme. Now that notably is probably likely due to the large-scale remediation and the infrastructure works that would need to be delivered on this brownfield site in order to bring residential homes forward. I think in terms of the amount of people that are on our waiting list, clearly the council hasn't been meeting its housing delivery tests, and so there are limited amounts of new affordable housing coming onto the market within this borough, and this proposal does offer above the reasonable amount and does represent units that will be given nomination rights to the council to deliver at a social rent value. So we are satisfied that the applicant has provided a satisfactory amount of affordable housing, and review mechanisms would look at, over the course of the development, the potential for further delivery.
And if I may, Chairman, one further question. We've heard fire safety mentioned both from the applicant and the objectors. In your view, are there any any further reasonable steps that the applicant could take at all to enhance the fire safety of this application?
So this was a matter that was considered in great detail by officers and officers in our building control department. What we have made the applicants do is undertake a site-wide fire statement, and then they will be required to produce building plot design reviews for fire statements as they come forward through the Reserved Matters application. The site-wide fire statement sets out measures over and above the requirements of building regulations to suppress and delay fire. So in the site-wide statement, for example, they've committed to providing wet rise mains irrespective of the building height. So even if they sit below the threshold, they would be providing wet mains above standard residential sprinkler systems and feasibility studies for smoke ventilation. So they have gone above what we would usually require, and the hope is there that it would suppress fire in the event of an emergency. So yes, we are satisfied. Further to that, we've recommended conditions that members can consider in terms of bringing full compliance with the site-wide fire statement for the developments as they come forward through the Reserved Matters stage, and the submission of quality design review panels, which is also an imposition of our local plan policy, policy CD16. So yes, we're satisfied that we've considered that matter in full.
Thank you, Chair and officers. Number one, as was brought up before, just some clarity around James Latham's position, and a follow-up after. But
yes, apologies. I think what's happened here is that James Latham has obviously provided comments, but also appended his original comments. So if you look at his the commentary, he concludes on the 12th of June 2025 that he removes his objections to the proposal and recommends conditions to secure additional information, which we've imposed on the application. The original concerns just related to drainage and further correspondence required with the Canal and River Trust, which has been undertaken. In addition to that, obviously the site is in a low area of risk for flooding comparatively. Understood. And it was more about pressure it would potentially put on other areas, but I think you've answered my question there. And sorry, but there's just so much to get through in that. Okay. I also, I mean, look, overall, there's a huge amount of discussion, and I don't really see. It seems to be the position of the of housing officers and the report that you provided that you've taken that there's a balance. It doesn't fulfil quite a few requirements or suggestions, however you'd like to phrase that. But the decision has been made that it's worth it in the long run. And I suppose I don't really understand the methodology there. I mean, it seems quite. It seems there's an element of subjectivity. How is it decided that it's not worth providing this type of development, which doesn't meet the criteria that we'd like for social housing, is worth it in the long run, especially when there are quite so many questions around it? I mean, we don't. That's the nature of the housing crisis we have. I couldn't afford to live in the borough I grew up in if I wasn't a council tenant. This wouldn't help a lot of people, potentially. So my question is, how does that calculation get made? So in terms of the planning balance that we've undertaken, officers have noted that there are some conflicts with policy, but that overall the proposals would comply with the development framework as a whole. The reason for this is obviously it's a large-scale site with a number of different competing criteria to deliver here. So whether that be housing or it requires the delivery of sustainable measures for that housing, such as PV panels, etc. There's a lot of pressure to deliver. Overall, the scheme is considered compliant. Where it comes to affordable housing, I just go back to the previous statements given, is that a robust review of their financial viability assessment was made, and so we are satisfied that they have delivered the maximum reasonable, which is a policy requirement to show if they're not delivering at the 35.7% that's initially set out by the policy, that is a permissible route to go down via both the London plan and local plan policies. In terms of the balance that we've made, we've considered that the development does comply as a whole. However, even if we were to take the view that the development wasn't in compliance with all of the local plan policies, because the council is currently failing its housing delivery, the tilted balance would come into force, and therefore we would need to demonstrate severe harm in order to refuse such an application with the scale of housing as it's proposed. So there's a balance to be struck.
Thank you. And a follow-up. How does that expose the council if we were to make a decision? I mean, what does the what if that if there are grounds to appeal that at a higher level? Like that sounds like it's again subjective enough to open up, a doubt further along the process, or am I misreading that?
The officer the officer report sets out that we feel that as a whole, looking at all of the policies within the development plan and looking particularly at the primary policies which govern this site, which is the vision for the borough, which is V2, policy PLV1, and the site allocation SA1, the development is broadly in compliance with those policies. So we found it in compliance with the development plan. In terms of there's now a presumption in favour of development as it applies to this site because of the council's position in accordance with its delivery of housing. So that is the route by which officers have to consider this application, and indeed members would need to give mind to that presumption in favour of sustainable development. But ultimately, it's a judgment that members will need to turn their mind to in terms of that planning balance. But the degree of housing that is offered is given very substantive weight by officers in terms of the overall conclusions on the application.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So I did want to ask about the tilted balance, but I think you've explained about that. So can you talk to us about the site allocation and how the site's been assessed as the Kensal Canal Opportunity Area, and what does this mean for the planning application, and does it guide us or compel us to approve or refuse any certain application?
So the site allocation, which is under local plan policy SA1, was found sound by the Inspectorate in July of 2024. So we have to consider the application against the provisions, the criteria that are set out within that policy. Some of those key criteria are for delivery of residential homes, for commercial floor spaces, for high density development. It allows the provision for tall buildings, all of which the application is delivering against. And so ultimately an assessment has to be made against that site allocation as the application is being brought forward within this opportunity area, which has been allocated both by the London plan and by our own local plan and previous plans before that. So members do have to have mind to the specific criteria of that policy in considering the application.
Ask a follow-up. So what I also wanted to ask about is, I mean, it's a big proposal, it's a big site, and we're not the only decision makers. So what can we do, I mean, depending on which way we decide tonight, but what can we do to make sure that other decision makers who perhaps aren't as local as us listen to all of the objections and issues and comments that have been made?
I mean, I think in regard to the stage 2 GLA considerations? Yes, I mean, obviously a package of information would be submitted to the GLA for consideration, and that would include all of the details that before members this evening. And so obviously there's been a significant amount of commentary provided by local residents, and that's included in the addendum pack. So this information would be there for members of the GLA to consider ultimately in stage 2 considerations.
Thank you. It was partly on that I was going to ask officers, which is whatever we decide tonight, it seems that the Mayor and potentially the Secretary of State are the next part in the process. And so, as my colleagues have pointed out, I think all of this is presumably material information from us that they can consider, and that's why it's sort of helpful, this discussion. In terms of what we are actually deciding tonight, just want to check that I've understood this correctly. This is actually this application is for full planning permission only for the plot 2 basements, the ground floor and mezzanine Sainsbury, and primary access, and the rest is outline. I just wanted to understand what this committee or what the process is for the remaining parts as details get clarified, how they come forward through planning committee over the coming years.
Yes, so the application is hybrid, so it's part detailed, which is essentially operating as a full planning application, and part outline. So for the detailed element, that's the replacement supermarket, which includes the 2 basement floors and the ground and mezzanine floor associated with the supermarket, some small-scale community uses, and some ancillary residential features within that detailed element, and indeed the internal road network, so that's the avenue, South Drive, West Drive, previously mentioned. The outline application, members are considering the high-level principles that will govern development that comes forward within the outline application, and that will come through further applications submitted to the local planning authority in the form of reserve matters applications, which will contain further detail on how those plots will come forward, how that development will come forward, and that includes all of the residential development, it includes the tall buildings, so there will be opportunity for further review as they come through the planning system.
I've got a couple of final questions. First of all, the issue of Canalside House has been raised, which, if I recall the proper phrase, is a non-designated heritage asset. Now, that clearly within the proposal would be demolished. Are we absolutely clear that the commitment to enable organisations that are there at the moment to have adequate accommodation in the interim, and then for them to be able, if they wished, to return to site in due course when other things are built? Is that within the Section 106 agreement? Is that all set out within the Section 106 agreement?
Yes, so a temporary relocation strategy would be secured via the Section 106 agreement, as well as commitments to re-providing the floor space within the actual development site. That equates to around 800 square metres of specific social and community floor space as per the current arrangements at Canalside House for its uses. That commitment to redeliver would see the delivery of Grade A office space, space associated with the use of Canalside House, so an improved position from its current condition, as it were. But yes, that's all secured through the Section 106.
Are there any other questions, colleagues? No? Councillor Saran.
I do have one more question, which was to do with one of the comments from the objectors. Actually, I think I heard it from a couple of places, which is about the 158 homes that are at the London Living Rent and managed by the GLA. So I guess I'm just concerned that when we think about our residents and the many residents we see who are waiting for homes, are those 158 homes going to benefit them, or are they going to be for other people?
So our local plan policy requires a mixed delivery, a mixed tenure of affordable housing. So we seek a percentage split of social rent and a percentage split of intermediate. The reason for that being is to try and create socially mixed communities coming forward. So the application's delivery of 158 shared ownership products would be in line with the local plan policy, which does seek not just social rented properties, but other tenures of affordable housing. So that is in accordance with the development framework, and we would expect the developer to deliver both social rent and intermediate products.
But I guess the question is it going to be for our residents or is it going to be for anybody?
Just to follow up on the answer and to be clear, within the Section 106 agreement, we will secure nomination rights to the intermediate homes provided as part of this proposal. The Council, through its housing functions, has an intermediate allocations policy and will use that to nominate people into those intermediate units. There are allocation criteria within that policy, a housing policy, I might add, not a planning policy, and one of those criteria does relate to people living in the borough. So yes, the intermediate housing provided as part of this development will be available to middle income earners in the borough, and we as a council will have nomination rights for those properties.
Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Chair. Just a final question, which I would be remiss if I didn't bring up. There is some suspicion, general suspicion, about our consultation practices, and obviously, I know this is basically why I'm here in the first place, running for council, but. I'm not entirely sure how rigorous some of that data that was collected is, particularly in terms of support. I mean, I do, again, anecdotally, there were some allegations around how residents were approached in North Kensington housing estates nearby, and I'm now realizing that I'm not seeing that on the report. I do understand we have some legal obligations. The council has some legal obligations to investigate that sort of thing when we're using that as, evidence for or against a recommendation. So, again, these are very, very big packs, so I could well have missed something, and that wouldn't be the first time. But can you perhaps address this? Thank you.
Yes, so we've addressed the consultation process that you're referring to at paragraph 10.1.4 of the officer's report. Indeed, letters of support have been received by the council and there have been consultation exercises undertaken by the applicant. However, in officer's view, in the way that we've considered them, even if members were to give no weight to the letters of support, the officer recommendation would remain as is, given the delivery of housing proposed. So, yes, we've addressed the consultation exercise in paragraph 10.1.4.
Good. No further questions. In that case, colleagues, we need to move to make a decision. I've got a few points that I'd like to set out as a sort of framework, perhaps, to consider matters. We obviously start off with the provision of new housing, and we've heard discussion of the methodology of trying to assess a proper contribution of affordable housing in its various forms. I think that overall, in the context of RBKC, the numbers we are talking about are very significant, and it's been mentioned that for all sorts of reasons that we understand, due to the nature of the borough, the number of, for example, social rent homes that have been given permission within the last number of years is actually very modest indeed. So 500 affordable homes is a significant, must be considered, a considerable benefit, as indeed is the total number of homes at 2,500 plus. Excuse me. I'd just like to say a word or two. We've really touched on it, but in terms of design and tall buildings and public realm and townscape, I think a lot of this is really driven from the nature of the site allocation. Now, I think a lot of us, and I'm thinking in particular a few of the objectors who've spoken, who are well-known participants in RBKC affairs, if we were having an everyday conversation, we would probably agree that having a target of 3,500 homes for this site was really a very high target, and that target implied very dense development. And I think what we've got in front of us as a proposal can really only be seen in that context. Bearing all of that in mind, I think the designs, look rather, they look rather attractive. I have to say, I've never seen a CGI image that didn't look quite attractive, but never mind. But no, seriously, I think these buildings, if they are built out in the sort of way in which we would expect, I think will provide new homes that people will be very, very willing to live in and be happy there. If I can just touch very briefly, we've not spoken about heritage very much, but I think it is important that we acknowledge, because it's very much in the officer's report, and it's reflected in some of the images that we've seen. I think we have to acknowledge that there is a degree of harm of such a large-scale development happening close to Kensal Cemetery in particular. I think for Kensal House, it obviously lies to the south, so that's slightly different. But the cemetery to the north, I think, I think there is an impact. I would suggest that the officer's report is entirely correct in saying that this would constitute less than substantial harm, and less than substantial harm must be weighed against the benefits of a scheme in the planning balance. I'd just like to briefly touch on the final two headings that I have. First of all, matters to do with the environment. We've heard about contamination, and we've heard a great deal of detail about how the applicant might go about dealing with this issue of a former gasworks site. I think we have to recognise that for a period of it must have been almost 100 years, it was certainly decades, gasworks were simply a feature of the urban landscape. There are lots of sites all over the place that used to be gasworks, and quite a few of them have been developed. So although I think it is quite alarming to hear about sort of potential tar pits and all of these things relating to the now redundant process of producing gas by burning coal in a particular way, that all has to be dealt with in a very careful fashion. And personally, I'm satisfied that this has been addressed in a reasonable way. Finally, we come to transport, and I think this is slightly curious because I have to say personally, by this stage, I would have thought that there would be a definite scheme to say what the new junction was going to look like. And in some ways, I am reassured to hear that although a four-arm junction is still on the table, that there would appear that there have been discussions which are angling strongly towards a three-arm junction. It's certainly true that in order for any of this access to the site to work, a completely new junction must be created. And I think it sounds as though that work is in hand. So in conclusion, I would say there is less than substantial harm to some heritage assets. I think we must note that and accept that. I am concerned about contamination, but I think that can be dealt with by condition, and I am satisfied that the transport matters that I think we're all concerned about, that they can be resolved in a satisfactory way, and that the overall balance of the proposal must be viewed with the provision of new housing in mind. And I think this is a very significant benefit of the scheme. And I think you can argue would it be desirable if it was more? Of course it would. More affordable housing. But the fact is, it is still a very significant amount of housing, and including affordable housing. And I think on that basis, on balance, I am inclined to support the proposal. But I would now invite my colleagues to make their own points and their own sort of assessment of where we might be. Who would like to go first? Councillor Mackover first.
Thank you. I agree with all of those things that you have said. This is an operation in balancing a lot of information. And I just wanted to add one comment, which is my sort of review of all of this has been very considerably helped by the quality and the clarity and the readability of the officers' report, which I really thank them for. That's 436 pages, 121 conditions. And we all have views and worries about individual elements, but the report does explain how officers have reached their recommendation and how they have balanced out the competing issues, the harms versus the public benefits. And having, with that assistance, I'm very happy to go along with all the comments that you have made, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the arguments we've heard about the amount of new housing and particularly the affordable housing, I mean, I think it would be very difficult for me to sit here and not support those affordable homes, given the increasing number of people and residents that we see, or I see in my surgeries, but it doesn't take away from the really very serious and significant objections and issues that have been raised. And I guess my plea would be that those concerns are heard very loudly with the developer and with other decision makers who are going to be looking at this. But we've asked, I think, quite searching questions about contamination, transport, the viability, and I feel satisfied with the conditions that Councillor Mackover has mentioned and the mechanisms in place that these can be managed.
Would anyone else like to? Councillor Benton. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I mean, not for the first time, I do disagree with the direction of travel the committee seems to be going in. I think, yes, this is a balancing act. I'm just simply not satisfied that a lot of the things that are on the table are frankly specific or really locked down enough to result in something that's going to work long term. I don't see the transport issue, I don't see the infrastructure really arising there, certainly not guaranteed to arise there to serve the amount of residents that are intended to live there. I mean, these are all possible, but my experience tells me that if something's possible, it are on the side of it's not going to happen. It needs to be locked down. There's too much uncertainty around canal side. I think when the rubber meets the road, excuse me for saying that phrase too often, anyone that knows me, but when the rubber meets the road, I don't know what that's going to look like for the services that are based in Canalside. I don't see that functioning for the length of time we're going to have, you know, a building site. I don't, on balance, see enough interrogation of the methodology deployed in terms of why do we have, can we really not have more housing? And I know this sounds, you know, maybe I'm a dummy, but I don't see the kind of scrutiny of that, that methodology and that process that I would like to see. Most of it is not going to be the kind of housing I think we need in the borough. And again, I've said, look, yes, we need housing. It's what kind of housing for whom? So frankly, because of the, I think there's a subjectivity involved. I don't trust these things to actually work in the long run. I haven't been reassured. So I am falling on the other side, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. I broadly agree with your assessment. I won't repeat points made by my colleagues, but in addition, I was reassured by the points made by the applicant and officers in relation to fire safety. I would continue to encourage the applicant to go above and beyond in that respect. I would also prefer more affordable housing. I do, to some extent, agree with comments made by the objectors that I do think the percentage is probably on the low side. However, when considered in the round and when considered in the context of the need, the urgent need to provide more affordable housing, I'm minded to agree with the points you made earlier, Chairman.
Well, thank you all for those comments. Before I formally take a vote, can I just quickly and briefly return to officers? The recommendation that we will be voting on is 166 in the officers' report. And now it has been mentioned, Councillor Mackover, of course, mentioned it quite explicitly, that we are agreeing to support this application, but it must go to the GLA / the Mayor of London for their stage 2 consideration. And of course it would always be open for the Secretary of State to intervene at any stage. I just want to be certain about that. And my second point was just to make certain about the Section 106 agreement, and that we're happy with the wording of that. That's set out in the proposed recommendation. I just wanted to double check that before we actually had a vote on the recommendation. Thanks.
Yes, as you say, the application would still be subject to consideration by the GLA through their stage 2 process, and officers are satisfied with the recommendation as set out in paragraph 1.66 of the officers' report.
I don't really have anything to add. I mean, the Section 106 agreement, it's going to be based on the heads of terms as identified in it's actually in the addendum report. They've been revised, but yeah, we've got there's a date of May 2026. I'm not involved with the Section 106 myself. I assume May is going to be sufficiently in the future for it to be completed by then. Okay, so that's fine, Chairman.
Very good, thank you. So in that case, I'm going to ask for a decision. So the recommendation in section 1.66 of the report is to support the application as set out in the recommendation there. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? Can I see those against? The recommendation is agreed by 4 votes to 1. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen, for coming this evening, and thank you.